Admiral Davidson, thank you so much for your time. Very much appreciated. At your Senate confirmation hearing as the top US military official in this region back in May 2018, you said, in short, China is now capable of controlling the South China Sea in all scenarios short of war with the United States. Is that still your view?
The Chinese presence in the South China Sea, really built during the periods 2014 to 2018, is a significant challenge to the international order. All of us that depend on the free and open sea space there to deliver goods, to transmit our financial information on the seafloor, to communicate between our nations. That's threatened by the infrastructure that China has put in that air and sea space. Importantly, over the last year and a half has been the international community's willingness to operate within the 9-dash line, whether it's Australia, the UK, France, Japan, India, New Zealand, it goes on and on. It has sent an important signal that the tensions in the South China Sea is not a US-China issue of tension. It's actually China international order. The United States will continue to operate in the South China Sea, and we will sail, fly, and operate wherever international law allows. Encourage all nations on the planet to do that, the ASEAN nations as well. And I think it's very, very important as we think about the future there, that the international order and the reliances that we all have on that sea space be used by everyone on the planet.
So have things changed in your view since those remarks where you said that China had the capacity to...
Well, China continues to maintain that infrastructure. In April of 2018, they moved some surface-to-air missiles, some anti-ship cruise missiles, some electronic jammers out there. Those persist within the region, within those militarized features out there. It's one of the reasons that China will not be back to the Rim of the Pacific exercise, RIMPAC as it's known, in Honolulu this coming summer. It's part of the 2019 National Defense Authorization Act in the United States that China will not be permitted back into the exercise until it demonstrates persistent stability, removes the weapons from those militarized features as well, and acts in accordance with international law.
As you alluded to, this waterway is very important, has a third of the global shipping go through the South China Sea. Has the US and its allies been too slow in dealing with this creeping expansion of Chinese control?
No, I've been quite encouraged by the international community's step up in the South China Sea over the course of the last year and a half. It has sent a very important signal to China. It's something that China is commenting on, not only to us, but to the other nations in the region, and we need to stay after it and continue to operate there.
You mentioned since 2014 that they've expanded their role in their control of these outposts, reclaimed territory. Since 2012, in fact, more than 24 man-made island outposts have been built by the Chinese. How have they been able to do that?
Well, through severe environmental destruction. I mean, it's estimated that more than 3,000 acres of the bottom of the sea was torn up in order to build these features. In many aspects, it's the worst environmental destruction that's ever happened in the sea space.
And are you satisfied now that the international community gets it in terms of how to respond?
I think certainly. I mean, I think the international community can always do more. But I certainly appreciate all that Australia and other nations have done along the South China Sea to demonstrate persistent and presence there and to exercise there in that sea space. It sends a very important signal of our solidarity across the international community.
The US Naval War College projects that the Chinese military will have 430 ships and 100 submarines by 2030, along with these island outposts. Does that give them unequivocal maritime supremacy?
No. One of the strengths of the international community is our alliance and partnership network. One of the key reasons I'm here in Australia this week, and I met with both General Campbell, the Chief of the Defense Forces, as well as Admiral Noonan, was to talk about our interoperability, our compatibility, and our willingness to operate together throughout the Indo-Pacific.
But has the US focus turned from maintaining supremacy to denying supremacy to any other one nation? Has there been a shift?
I mean, I can't dictate what China's going to build and how they're going to build it. The United States' presence here in the Western Pacific has been more than 200 years in depth and will continue to be persistent.
Has the Middle East been a distraction for policymakers and military planners for too long, when really the main strategic game is right here in this region?
We have continued deep interests in the Middle East. We have partners and friends there, and a key ally. It's the administration's intent to never allow a nuclear weapon from Iran, and that's going to require our continued presence there as well.
But in terms of resources over the years, has there been too much focus there when, as I say, in a strategic sense, China is the main game when it comes to the United States?
And I think the United States is going all in on the Indo-Pacific. President Trump announced a vision for a free and open Indo-Pacific in Vietnam in the fall of 2017. That vision has been advanced by Vice President Pence and Secretary Esper and previous Secretaries of Defense. Critical to that vision is the emphasis that we've put on our commitments, reaffirmations of our mutual defense obligations with Japan, our mutual defense obligations with the Philippines, the agreement to extend our compact negotiations with the freely associated states of Palau, Micronesia, and the Marshall Islands, activities like that. And our continued U.S. Navy, Air Force, Army, and Marine Corps presence throughout the region is important.
Would you like to see Australia carry out freedom of navigation patrols within 12 nautical miles of the reclaimed Chinese territory?
That's something that has been asked of Australia. I'm most interested in Australia's vocal support of our freedom of navigation operations. It's key assistance to the ASEAN nations in helping them define a code of conduct that does not limit to any more extent than international law already allows operations in the South China Sea, and to continue to exercise and partner with us throughout the Indo-Pacific.
Would it make a difference if Australia, along with the UK, France, did carry out those freedom of navigation exercises or patrols within that 12 nautical mile space?
Again, the right of everybody to fly, sail, and operate where international law allows should be exercised by all. The United States has long run freedom of navigation operations profile that has been pretty assertive. And we would welcome others to do that regime, particularly where there are conflicts to claims, and those exist in the South China Sea. It's not about taking one nation's position or another. There are multiple nations in the South China Sea with conflicting claims there. What's important is that we send the signal that international law should mediate those claims, and everyone's participation there would be helpful.
And Admiral, did you mention that to the Prime Minister yesterday? I know you met him in Canberra.
Of course, we talk about freedom of navigation operations all the time.
And that request was
I'll
made as well?
leave it to the Prime Minister to talk about where he is on it.
The US has long-standing intelligence bases in Australia and has regular rotations of Marines through the northern parts of the country. Has it become a question not if, but when and how to ask Australia to use Australian soil for a permanent base or military battery?
We're quite grateful for the presence that we have in Darwin, both for our Marine rotational forces and our enhanced air cooperation profile up there at Tyndall and at Darwin for our United States Air Forces. We think it provides just incredible training opportunity for us, as well as an ability to exercise together, and sends a strong signal to the region that the U.S.-Australia alliance is strong and unwavering.
Do you think at some point you would like to see a permanent military base in Australia? As I say, there's long-standing intelligence bases, and there's been speculation that maybe a US base or missile battery might be in order.
I'm quite satisfied with the posture that we have here with Australia. It's a partnered posture, and we'll keep it that way.
What's the greatest risk for the tensions to erupt into all-out conflict in this region?
The tensions, there's a series of challenges in the region that I think we all need to pay attention for. First and foremost is North Korea. As long as they retain the ability to develop nuclear weapons, potentially target others with those nuclear weapons, that'll remain our most immediate challenge. And it's on myself and General Abrams in Korea to help maintain the readiness of our forces, make room for diplomacy. I would say the defining strategic challenge for our time, though, is indeed China and its very pernicious approach to the region in all aspects, whether it's the way they apply developmental funds, the diplomatic coercion they put on others, their activities in the South China Sea, and the very disruptive ways that they use their economy to punish others when they don't like what others is doing. I think that's the strategic and defining challenge of the century.
It's very interesting because that's something that's been reflected, I guess, in various defence papers and analysis out of Washington. But at the same time, the president describes President Xi as his friend and looks forward to more talks and so on. How do the two things work together side by side?
Yeah, the two presidents have a relationship and many issues that they need to work through.
Obviously not going to go there. As far as China goes in terms of the challenges they face, coronavirus is a big one right now. Do you believe if they don't effectively deal with it, that could be a risk to the stability of that particular regime?
Certainly the threat of pandemic diseases is a threat to everyone in the region. The United States has offered assistance to China, as have many other nations, I know. And we'll continue to offer that assistance to help prevent the spread of that disease.
Are you concerned that one of the members of the Five Eyes intelligence community, being the UK, has granted access to Huawei within their 5G network? Is that a risk?
We're deeply concerned about Huawei and the capability it would retain to siphon information of all kinds from every user of that equipment into the Chinese intelligence machine and straight to the Communist Party of China. Everyone needs to go into those decisions with their eyes wide open, and we encourage others not to allow Huawei to build their cores and backbones.
Okay, so in terms of the UK, do you think they've been naive in that sense?
I'm not going to comment on that. Thank you.
After you spoke about North Korea, after the summits and the theatre of the talks between President Trump and the North Korean leader, have we seen a return to the normal trend of saber rattling and threats out of Pyongyang?
Certainly everyone's aware of the threat of a Christmas surprise. I would say a lack of that, a missile test in that time frame was a bit of a surprise in and of itself. We remain postured in case of a demonstration, either a nuclear test or a missile test from North Korea, and we remain committed to the process that will take us to a denuclearized North Korea.
There have been reports North Korea has developed a nuclear capable submarine. Would that alter the balance in terms of the threat from that rogue regime?
Certainly, any means by which North Korea would seek to produce or develop weapons of mass destruction is a challenge to the theater. That would be just another one of them.
We've had a long-standing alliance with the United States. How do you see the Australia-US alliance into the future?
Yeah, rock solid. You know, we just celebrated the 100 years of mateship back in 2018. We even in Honolulu had a number of celebrations there. I expect that this alliance is going to persist for centuries. It is a deep alliance beyond just economics and the military relationship that we have. There's extraordinary people-to-people ties there. I think a deep partnership to think about the future, whether it's space, cyber, you mentioned intelligence sharing, the kind of technologies that I think will really advance the productivity of our nations alone, frontier technologies, and we'll be deeply committed and partnered there for the foreseeable future.
And as you mentioned, it's a deep relationship in the sense that some, I think, often see it just between the two leaders, but it goes much further than that, doesn't it? And in that military interoperability that we've seen increasing over recent years.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are 1,000 U.S. businesses here in Australia alone. We are a deep, in fact, the #1 foreign direct investor here in Australia. That's a deep relationship that represents, persistent and interest. And speaks to the partnership we'll have for decades to come. And frankly, we have a large U.S. military presence of staff members that help integrate with all kinds of Australian military and intelligence organizations. And in Honolulu alone, we have the deep presence of Australian officers, indeed on my staff and on the staff of all my components, and that'll persist.
Admiral Davidson, it's an honour to meet, and welcome to Sydney, your first visit here. I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to meet you, Kieran.